Smith stated, I did get accepted into the prep program in 2005 and was given the opportunity to work in Dr. X.J. May's lab. I worked on hepatitis E virus, basically understanding the foodborne transmission and the molecular mechanisms of cross-species infection. Then I graduated in December of 2010, and then I went on to do my postdoc at Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York, and I now work on Ebola and Marburg virus, not the actual virus, but rather the viral proteins and understanding how they interfere with the antiviral response in cells that they tend to infect. And so for the next 20 to 25 minutes, I've been tasked with sharing a few tips, if you will, on how to make the most out of your grad school experience. And if you have any questions or input, feel free to stop me throughout. I don't have a pointer, so kind of bear with me on that as well. But I've come up with about 11 tips that I've detailed here, and I'll try to go through them each one by one. And the first one, I think the most important, which probably wouldn't pertain to you guys, but I think the first tip is important to new students, and it's to be selective, especially when you're choosing a research lab. You're going to be in this lab for 4, 5, maybe even 6 years, depending on your program. So it's absolutely important that you try to pick a lab that best fits your interest. And so I've come across a number of students over the years, or more so now that I've been in my postdoc, is that these students tend to choose labs based on the familiarity of their PIs. They tend to choose people that are world-renowned leaders in their field, or they tend to publish a lot in Nature or Science and things like that, but they're not really interested in the research. So what you have with these students a year later ready to get out because they really weren't interested in science anyway. So I think it's very important that you choose a lab who's performing research that you're genuinely interested in. And the second factor I think that you should consider when choosing a lab is your advisor. You have to think about what you're really looking for in an advisor. Do you want an advisor who has grad students or maybe postdocs that produce a lot of papers, or does that not really matter to you? Or are you more interested in an advisor that's available? Like if you want to talk to them in person, will they be there for you? Or are you okay with an advisor that travels a lot and may only be accessible by email? So those are some things that you should consider as well. And because you will be working with this advisor for some time, you have to determine whether or not you want an advisor that's approachable. Do you feel comfortable talking with your advisor when you're having problems? Or are you okay with an advisor that may be a little more not so personable? But those are things that for everybody is different, and it's for you to decide what works best for you. And then the third thing that I considered was the lab environment. If your advisor isn't around that frequently, are there other people in the lab, such as postdocs or senior grad students, that might be there to help you along the way? If you have questions, will they be there to help you? Or is your lab welcoming? Do you kind of work as a team, or is everybody off doing their own thing? So so you might be asking, well, how do I find out this information? Well, luckily for most people, or some programs, you have the ability to rotate and you can find out this information on your own. But a lot of this stuff is also online. If you're interested in finding out about a potential advisor's research, you can just go to PubMed and type in his name, and then that will also show how many papers he's actually put out as a sign of their productivity. And also, you can attend some of their classes. You might not be enrolled in the classes, and you don't have to be enrolled in the classes. You can just go to the classes to get a sense of how the advisor or the potential advisor interacts with students. You can also talk to the grad students. I find that a lot of grad students are very open to sharing their experiences about the current labs that they're in, so I think that's a great tool to utilize as well. And then you can also just schedule a meeting with the potential advisor as well. A lot of faculty are very receptive and open to doing so. The second point is to be knowledgeable, especially when it comes to knowing your program requirements. As we all know, we have classes to take, so it's very important that you know what the required courses are ahead of time so that you can plan accordingly. The second thing is that a lot of programs require that you, of course, submit research proposals, and a lot of programs have oral or written exams that you have to pass. And then I think more recently, I think a lot of programs, especially at Mount Sinai, they actually require their students to publish at least 1 or 2 papers before before they graduate. So it's good to know these things ahead of time, especially because there's a time factor associated with these things. I know that in the biomedical and veterinary science program, it's kind of expected that you try to finish your coursework within the first 2 years and then maybe dedicate the rest of your time to doing research. So you might want to check your handbook to make sure that that's not the case for your program, or just to be aware. And the second thing is your research proposal. I know there's a time factor included with that as well. Sometimes your particular program may want you to focus in on that, maybe the end of your first year or towards the beginning of your second year to start preparing that and getting that submitted. There's also a time factor associated with some of the exams that we take as well, although that is a little bit variable from lab to lab. So it's a good idea to just become really knowledgeable and do some research on what your particular program requirements are. So then, of course, you can plan accordingly. And then the third point I think is really important, or tip, is to be proactive. It's up to you to take responsibility for your own grad school experience. Don't rely on your advisor to do so for you. And I think the major part of that is kind of figuring out what you want from grad school and developing a plan of study that kind of reflects that. If you want to do teaching, then I would highly encourage you to try to look for opportunities that will allow you to do so. But as far as, and maybe include that on your plan of study. Think about the courses that you want to take, when you want to take them. See if you have time to take some additional classes that may not be necessarily related to your field, but that you really want to, that you do really want to take. And then I would always encourage people to search for a mentor. It could be your advisor, or it could be somebody else. It could be another faculty member, or maybe even a grad student. But I would suggest that whomever you seek for the mentor, at least they should at least be in a position to give you advice. They should have at least successfully completed some of the stages that you're hoping to complete. So just be cautioned on that. And the third point that's really important is to start identifying your research interests. I know that you've probably chosen a lab that you're interested in based off the general research, but I think there comes a point in time when you should start thinking about some of the questions that may in your field that you might be interested in answering during your grad school work, and it maybe jot a list down, maybe even go talk with your advisor and come up with some sort of plan. I think that the advisor will be very impressed with your initiative and as well as your effort, and I think that will go a long way in your research career as well. And then lastly, just start very early meeting faculty members that might share your research interests. And the reason for this will become more apparent on this slide, which lists my fourth tip, which is to be reflective, especially when you're trying to put together a grad student committee. Just like your advisor, your committee members will be with you for 4, 5, or 6 years. They'll be guiding you, challenging you along the way, getting you prepared to graduate with this PhD. So you want to make sure that your committee is a good fit for you, and that so it's a good idea to start thinking about that ahead of time. So what are the things that you should be looking for in a committee? The first, of course, is expertise. Take, for example, a student that may be in an interdisciplinary program, and so their committee should actually reflect that. And I know you guys have probably heard horror stories of committee members that don't mesh well, and so that can kind of hinder the progress of grad students sometimes. So you want to make sure that your potential committee members actually get along and are respectful of each other's opinions, so that that can benefit you in the long term. And of course, you want committee members that will support you and provide feedback. It's not going to be all niceness all the time. They're there to critique you and also give advice as to how you can improve along the way. So just make sure that whomever you choose for your committee, that you feel like they will be able to fulfill these requirements. And then the last tip I think that is important for selecting a committee member is their accessibility. I think you would want somebody that will be around if you had a problem. You could perhaps go and talk to them about something regarding your research. But what if they're really busy? I know that one of the people on my committee was actually the dean of the vet school, but surprisingly enough, he was always around when I needed to schedule my meetings. It was hard. I know that 2 weeks, maybe a month ahead of time, I had to go through his secretary to make sure that he would be there for my meetings, but that's something that you want to think about ahead of time, because it would be awful if you chose someone that traveled all the time or just wasn't in their office or available for you. So just keep those things in mind. And also, to go back to my previous tip, so when thinking about committee members, it would be great, that's why I said it's really important that you start networking and getting to know these faculty members, because then you have a better sense of who might be a better fit for you on your committee. So the fifth tip would be, of course, to be professional, not only in your studies, but in your interactions as well. I think a good part of being professional is to be organized. In grad school, we're collecting lots and lots of data, and you should organize that data. And so a rule of thumb that was taught to me is to make sure it could be in your lab notebook, it could be electronically, but I think most people prefer you to keep track of your data in your lab notebook. But make sure that just make sure that when you leave, whomever comes behind you can follow up on what you left behind. And that's really important. And so a funny story is I thought I did a pretty good job of this in Dr. Ming's lab. But then I went off to do my postdoc, and they have a completely different system, which I absolutely love. So now when I'm doing my experiments in my lab notebook, I will call a certain experiment experiment 1. And then now any data that I collect, I put in a file under experiment 1. Any boxes that I generate of samples, it's all labeled experiment 1. So anytime my boss comes in and asks me, oh, you might need to repeat this, or can I have some samples? I'll say, oh, sure, it's in the freezer under experiment 1. And I don't know, little things make me happy. But that's one of the things that I've since learned. I thought that I had mastered that in grad school, but there's always a better way of doing things, so just be aware of that. And the same can be said for protocols that you collect. During grad school, you'll be, of course, collecting data, and there's some method to your collection. And eventually, you're going to have to write this up for either a manuscript or maybe even your dissertation. So if you already have these protocols readily accessible in some organized manner, it will make it easier for you in the long run. And then that could be, the same can be said for literature. I think nowadays we have programs like EndNote where you can kind of save all your PDF files or your papers in there. But even if you don't use EndNote, you can do the same thing on your desktop or your laptop. Just create a folder and maybe section some of the articles off by a particular area of research. That would be helpful as well. And another point about being professional is being prepared. So as researchers, we tend to have lab meetings, to attend lab meetings, give lab meetings. The same can be said for seminars as well as conferences. And something that I've learned over the years is that you should definitely be prepared. Don't be relaxed about it unless the particular event calls for it. But with lab meetings, they're essentially geared towards you presenting an update on your research, and so that your, I guess, colleagues can maybe give you advice, or if you're having problems, they can offer you ways of getting around your problems. But we can't do that if you didn't come prepared yourself. I've noticed a lot lately at Mount Sinai that some of the grad students will come and they don't know what they've done. And now we're like, well, we can't help you if you come and haven't put together some sort of format as to what you've been working on within the last week or the last 2 weeks. So definitely try to be a little bit prepared. The same can be said for seminars. If you're giving a seminar, try to show up ahead of time, make sure that your presentations are well formatted and that there aren't any hiccups in that. And even if you're not presenting and just attending one, try to be on time. Or better yet, arrive a little early so that you'll have a chance to meet with the person that's actually giving the seminar. That's a helpful tip, and that's a part of networking, which I'll touch on a little later. And also, if you're going to a conference, whether or not you be presenting or just there, you should be prepared for that as well. You make sure that your presentation, of course your advisor will look over it to make sure that it's okay, but you should definitely come prepared and make sure that there's no grammatical errors or anything like that. And if you have a poster, you should be at your poster, not somewhere else. But also, I find it really helpful that when I'm going to a conference, they usually send you an abstract booklet. And so I'll sit down and I'll mark out all the talks that I want to go to, or all the workshops that I want to go to, or maybe even collaborators that I've yet to meet and I want to meet. So I'll plan out my the days of my conference, and it makes for a better use of your time. It really helps. So I would encourage you to do that as well. And then lastly, a part of being professional is being collegial. So as grad students, you're going to be working a lot with your lab mates. You might have collaborators as well. They might give you a particular reagent. They may give you a software. They may give you advice. Let's acknowledge them. Let them know that we appreciate what they've done. And when you're trying to build relationships in this industry, positive relationships, it's kind of, you know, building bridges. You don't want to burn them early on by not acknowledging somebody that's giving something to you, and help progress your research, of course. And the sixth thing, and a very important tip, is to be aware of what's going on currently in your field. I guess we're tasked as grad students to kind of answer questions that haven't been answered already. That's what you're here to do, answer a question that you propose or your field isn't so clear on. And so basically what we're doing is original research. It would be a travesty if you were working on something or trying to get an answer to something that somebody has already answered, and it's only because you weren't paying attention to what's going on. So make sure that you're aware of what's going on, not only for your personal research, but because it can benefit you also in the long term. If you're current with the literature or what's going on in your field, you can come across new methodology that could be beneficial to you in your grad work, such as there could be different technologies, assays, data collection methods that could be beneficial to you and might help your grad school experience be a little easier. So the good thing about this is that search engines like PubMed or even journal publications now allow you to select articles that you are interested in and select how frequently you want them to be sent to you. You can get them on a weekly basis, daily basis, or even monthly. So I think that's great. But one thing that I really find helpful even now, which I hated in grad school, were journal clubs. Journal clubs are very important. I know that in our department, I probably only went to a handful, and I regret having done that, but I go to them weekly. We have them weekly now at Mount Sinai, and 2 people present. It's amazing because you never know where your project is going to go. So if you're up to date on what's going on your research and you're attending a journal club that's probably interdisciplinary like ours, you get introduced to other literature that you might not be current on. And so you might get epiphanies or ideas from that, and you can take it back to the lab with you. So I would definitely encourage you guys to participate in journal clubs, and you learn so much. And I know that one thing that I encourage grad students now to do in our lab, because we're really based on innate immunity, a lot of the students in our lab don't like the adaptive immune response. So I challenge them to go and get papers on something that we're not so familiar with that. And so they take my advice, but it turns out to be really helpful to them. So I would just encourage, if you don't do anything else that I advise, I would just try to attend a couple of journal clubs while you're in grad school. I think it would be really helpful. And a seventh tip is just to be visible, which means that make your presence known, become a part of the research community, and an easy way to do that is to attend conferences, whether or not you're presenting or not. You get to meet people, discuss your ideas, or even hear theirs. And also, this is a great way to get up to date on the current research, although I have to admit, though, in my field, I don't feel like it's so current anymore. Most of the people have published their work already that's presenting at these conferences, so it's not so up to date. I guess it's kind of a mechanism to make sure that nobody's stealing your ideas. But still, definitely go. It's a great way to network. And also, publish papers. It kind of establishes you as a member of the research community, and then it also gives you a sense of feedback on what people think about your work. And then lastly, of course, you need to network. I mean, I'm not the most outgoing person, but I know that when I'm at conferences or seminars or things of that nature, I make a conscious effort to at least meet and build relationships with other researchers in my field. And I try to talk about my research as much as possible. The Ebola virus field is quite small, so it makes it relatively easy, but I still try to let people know what I'm working on so that they can give me feedback, especially since I'm so new to the field. And also, if someone expresses interest in your work, then follow up with them. Shoot them an email. Just continue to build those relationships. You never know when you can get a reagent from them or something in the future. So it's just good, a good sense of what you should do when you're going to these conferences. Just don't sit around and listen. Kind of be proactive. And then an eighth tip is just to be receptive to constructive criticism. We're in grad school, so you're going to get critiqued quite a bit. You can be critiqued on things such as your communication skills or even your research. I know that Dr. May would give me critiques on both of these all the time. So I'll share a story with you. When I first started presenting, I would be like this. And Dr. Beeman said, that's not right, you're distracting people. So usually, this is the first time that I've not done this, but he gave me a very important tip. He told me when I'm presenting, put my hand in my pocket. So ever since my first presentation, I will only present in a skirt, dress, or pair of pants that had a pocket. Today is the first time that I've actually not presented without having my hand in my pocket.
Just to show him.
So I think I've been doing a little better on that. So I try to be aware of what I'm doing with my hands. Usually I try to keep a pointer in one and then this hand in the pocket, but I don't have one today. I don't know what I was thinking. And also, you're gonna get critiqued a lot as well on your writing, and it's okay. Just be receptive to what people are telling you. They're just trying to help you. Dr. Mee wasn't trying to be mean to me. He was just trying to help me and better me in this field. So nowadays they have. Of course, practice makes perfect, but now they have developmental workshops that are geared towards improving people in their oral and written skills. And also, you're going to get critiqued a lot on your research. It could be even with your research proposal if that's a requirement of your particular program. Some people might think that, oh, they might critique and say your aims are too general, you should be a little bit more specific. Well, that's okay. Just listen to what they're saying and try to take heed and implement that and be aware of that as you proceed. The same thing can be said for your technical skills. Maybe you're in the lab and you're doing PCR, but you're doing it pretty dirty. And one of your lab mates might notice that your technique isn't all that good, and they might offer you advice, but don't get defensive. They're only trying to help you, so just listen to them. And the same thing can be said about a particular method. Maybe you're trying to answer a question and you think your method is the best, but maybe it's kind of archaic and there might be a new method. And just be receptive and open and willing to change. And again, grad school is about being supportive of you, being in support of you. So your colleagues will want to be supportive of you. So don't get offended and defensive when people are critiquing you, especially if it's constructive criticism and not destructive criticism, of course. And then the ninth tip is to be involved. Join an organization that provides some sort of personal or professional fulfillment. I know that we're here to learn and we're here to do research and we're here to graduate, but you should also take time out to give back, something that that you enjoy. So I've listed a couple of organizations that are here on campus. The first one is the Graduate Student Association. I think, which is a good association to be a part of. They kind of take some of the problems that are associated with grad student life, and if you have a problem, you can actually present it at this forum. I think Dean DePaul regularly attends these meetings, and she works really hard. I think one of the issues that was brought up when I was in grad school was a health insurance issue. We had to pay a lot for health insurance. That was brought up at one of the GSA meetings, and then by the time I graduated, health insurance was nearly covered. It wasn't 60% when we first started. It was now 100% covered. So if you have something that's bothering you about graduate school and you think should be voiced in a public forum, then I would suggest that you try to get a part of being in the GSA. You can be a delegate. I was a delegate. Or you can be a part of the governing body, or an officer. But I think a delegate is fine. Even if your department has a GSA, I was also part of that. We had our own. I think I started out as a secretary, and I think I was vice president one year. So I gained a lot from it, and you get to know your colleagues as well. And then another organization is a Black graduate student organization too. They do a lot on campus, and that's a good outlet to be involved in. And one thing that's fulfilling to me is mentoring other people, and there's a lot of ways that you can do that. There's a lot of programs on campus that you can get involved in. I was a mentor for prep every year that I wasn't a part of prep. And I also participated in a minority research program called BT STARS. It's no longer active, but it was sort of a camp for underrepresented children, actually. Middle school to high school, they were brought to Tech in the summertime for maybe a course of 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and we would teach them science, but in a fun way. I absolutely loved doing that, and I did it, of course, during the summer while I was still doing research work too. So you can do both. You don't have to limit yourself to just doing stuff in a lab and not doing other things. And then also volunteering. There's a lot of things that you can do around here to volunteer in the New River Valley. They have the big event, or if you're part of a sorority like I was, we did a lot of outreach here too. So just think about being involved in not just your grad school work, but in the community as well. And then the 10th tip would be to be prepared, because we all know that grad school can be challenging. And I've just listed a couple of things that some grad students over the years have had problems with, and I think Eric did a great job of discussing time management, or if that's really even possible according to him. But one of the things that I find, and just to reiterate what he said, I won't spend too much time, is to definitely set goals. They could be weekly goals, monthly goals, but just set goals so that you know that you're actually accomplishing something. And the same can be set for, forming a schedule so that you don't forget anything. And I definitely use a to-do list. Like I can't get by without it. So the day before, I will literally sit down and write down everything that I need to do the next day. I do that every single day, because I would forget to do something simple like split my cells, and then I won't be, which is important, because if I don't split my cells, then I won't be able to do research, the next day. So I have to write things down, especially when you're juggling multiple projects or you have a lot going on. It can be difficult balancing coursework in the beginning with lab work, or maybe you're writing a research proposal and doing lab work, or maybe you're writing your dissertation, and just a lot of things. So just try to take some time to maybe jot down or write a schedule. And then the second thing is a lot of grad students find it difficult to stay motivated. Maybe they're in an exceptional lab, but their research isn't quite going well. They might be having problems, and so, or maybe you're just unhappy with, or you're in a bad lab, you're just unhappy. But in either case, you just need to find a sympathetic ear. It could be another grad student, it could be a friend or a family member, just somebody that can hear you and give you encouraging words to try to get through. And also take time out, not a vacation, but just time out to do something else. Maybe go for a hike, maybe volunteer, or do some of the things that I mentioned on the previous slide. And so that will give you a little bit of clarity. If you can step back and then come back to a situation with a clear mind, you might be able to get through a little easier. And then the last 3 points are some other things that grad students have difficulty with, and that's maybe have some issues with their advisors, or maybe they're having funding problems. A lot of times I've noticed that grad students may enter lab with funding, but by the second and third year, it just so happens that funding isn't available anymore, so what do? So those are things that some grad students deal with as well. And then the last point is there might be financial difficulty. Our stipends are reasonable, but some people have difficulty maintaining quality of life with our stipends. So if you have any of those problems, it might be a good idea to maybe talk to your advisor. Or if you don't feel comfortable talking to your advisor, there's other people around, maybe your department head, your dean, or the ombudsman here in prep, or I think the grad school in itself has an ombudsman too, at least when I was here. So those are outlets that you can actually use if you have having these problems. And then lastly, be mindful that there is life outside of grad school, of course. Enjoy all that Virginia Tech has to offer, Blacksburg, and even New River Valley. There's things around, there's the Cascades, there's Smith Mountain Lake, I believe. Just lots of things that you can do outdoors that you should try to enjoy while you're here. And of course, just remember that you have friends and family outside of grad school, so try to stay in contact with them as much as you can. Don't let them get lost in your journey. And then also, just remember that this will be one of the most inspiring and satisfying times of your life. So just try not to be so stressed out and enjoy life. I know that while I was here, of course my lab was very supportive, but my BT prep cohort was very supportive as well. So we did a lot of things together, and that kept me grounded and made grad school a little bit more satisfying for sure. And then lastly, because your mother isn't here, just make sure that you get enough sleep, make time for physical exercise, and eat your veggies. And before I end, of course I would like to thank Prep for inviting me back to give this talk, and especially for the support that they gave me the first year, and for the family that they provided for me during the course of my grad school work. And I'd also like to thank, of course, the Virginia Maryland Regional College of Veterinary Medicine, specifically the Biomedical and Veterinary Science program, which is the program that I got my degree in, because they allowed me to participate in their program. But most of all, I'd like to thank Dr. H.J. Mean because he's an exceptional advisor. If it were not for him, then I wouldn't have been able to go on to do great things at Mount Sinai. And I get complimented all the time on my work ethic and my knowledge and all sorts of things. And I always say, well, if it weren't for H.J., I'm sure they'd get tired of hearing his name at Mount Sinai. I probably put him on the map there. And also to Dr. Ming's lab members, because we were a great bunch, and if it were not for their support, I don't think I'd be here standing in front of you here today. And also, of course, I'd like to thank my new lab at Mount Sinai in the microbiology department. It's a great group to work with there. And of course, for all of you that don't know, this is Mount Sinai right here, and that's Central Park. So I just sit at my desk and kind of daydream sometimes. But it's really, really beautiful during the summer, and during the winter, all that's covered in snow, and it's just all gloomy, and you kind of just don't want to be there. But thank you guys. I hope I didn't bore you too much, and I think that's the end.
All right.